Welcome to Conference of the Movements, com26v.com. Today, we are here to celebrate Native American Heritage Month, which is November, and also we are at the One Nation Gathering, which is part of our conference. Our goal is to bring 1,000 indigenous nations together to create a new federation of nations like the United Nations, which is to unify all the indigenous nations worldwide and to create, accelerate the change towards protecting Mother Earth, our planet, and also the new evolution of humanity towards a more conscious society. Today we have Adam Apollo, one of the co-founders of Unify.org, which is organization to bring people together from around the world for meditation. And it's the perfect alignment of us because we're trying to unify indigenous peoples worldwide. So Adam, take it away. Tell us who you are and what you're doing.
Thank you so much, David. It's really a deep honor and pleasure to be here with all of you today, particularly with the tone of today and the energy of supporting Indigenous nations and bringing our people together as a whole on the planet and resolving a lot of the wounds that have occurred on this planet over time with different nations, and particularly due to colonization here in the North American continent, as well as in areas all over the world. And so it's a very, very important topic to me. I personally kind of got thrown into a journey when I was in my early 20s that I didn't expect, and I didn't know it was coming. I ended up running into a friend at a grocery store in Asheville, North Carolina, and he told me, hey, I'm going up to this mountaintop in Boone, and I'm going to be cooking for these indigenous elders for these days, and they're supposedly fulfilling this prophecy. Do you want to come up with me and join me for this event? And I thought, wow, that's something different. And I decided to go along with it and showed up to cook for what ended up being a gathering of over 150 different elders from different nations from all over the world. And in the first night, as they were passing the torch around and each person was introducing themselves to the group, I stood up and my heart was pounding. You know, here I am, this little white kid, you know, in this group of these immense, very powerful, very beautiful elders speaking so eloquently and with such passion about their purpose in being there. And I just opened my mouth, and what came out was, I'm Adam Apollo, and I'm here to represent the youth of all of the nations who are not represented here. And they held me to it. They had me holding fire ceremony with them for 5 days straight. And I'm getting deeply to know this Tata Apolinario, who's a Mayan elder, who's opening the fire ceremonies each day by chanting the 13 tones and the 20 seals and the full 260 days Tzolk'in calendar. And I find myself smoking the White Buffalo peace pipe passed down from Crazy Horse with Orville Looking Horse and his family of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota Sioux nations, and sitting with Wasak and Hopi, Great Lakes tribe representatives, Cherokee from the mountains where I lived there in North Carolina, and others. And I knew that some part of me needed to be there, had a purpose for being there beyond what I could see at the time and beyond what I could know. And it took Bumpy, as we call him, Pu'uhonua Kekekanahele from Hawaii, giving me this whalebone hook to wear around my neck, and Orville Looking Horse telling me that his family was organizing this prayer run for world peace, and that his son had been in a car accident, and his daughter Gracie needed support in helping to organize these prayer runs. And so I said yes. I said, okay, sure. And the next thing I knew, I was, helping this group to organize indigenous youth runners from different reservations all over the country, and particularly on the East Coast, and coordinating with this West Coast organizer, my friend Allison Fast, who was in LA at the time. And then I'm running across the country carrying an Eagle staff, with a bunch of Lakota kids who, were listening to hip hop and pretty much like gangsters, and here we are like running for peace on the planet together to the Black Hills of South Dakota for the 10th annual World Peace Prayer Day ceremonies. And in that process and in that run, I felt like an outsider a lot of the time. I felt like the kid that was different, the kid that wasn't indigenous, to this nation. And it's true, I'm not. And my family, migrated here like many, many other families. And yet, as I began to dig deeper into my own life and my own history, I began to understand my indigenous tradition. And I began to understand that the Irish peoples and the people going all the way back through Wales, the Gaelic people, all the way back to the Tuatha De Danann, and perhaps before, had a culture and a lineage and a beauty to them that I'd never heard about, that I didn't know about. And I found myself fascinated by the idea of what people think of as the Irish, right? So I'm looking at the Irish people, and what I get is, oh, Guinness, right? Or four-leaf clovers, leprechauns, St. Patrick's Day. And in fact, besides leprechauns, none of those are root Irish tradition at all. And in fact, there's an entire, layer on top of the true ancient roots of Irish tradition that don't belong at all and that are not representative. And I began to very, very personally and deeply experience how far away from the true lineage honoring my own bloodline and tradition had gotten, right? And I came through that to understand that for Indigenous people, the different ways that their culture is co-opted and expressed in ways that are not in connection with their line, with their lineage, with their tradition and their ancestry, how offensive and how hurtful that can be. And I felt inside myself my own anger and my own hurt at the ways that my lineages, traditions had been taken away from my people, and how few Irish people I know in my life actually know anything about the ancient Irish tradition. They don't know about sword and chalice, staff and stone. They don't know that we honored the four directions just like other indigenous cultures. They don't know about the pathways and the medicines and what Celtic knotwork is truly all about, which is about creating sustainable weaves of life and energy on the planet. And honoring the seasons and the gateways of the seasons and the power of the change and the turning of the earth. And this is really why I wanted to come here and speak today, because I believe that if we're going to create new governance systems that can actually support all life on this planet, and if we're going to create community structures that enable us to truly work together as a planet, we have to get back in tune with the mechanisms and the cycles and the biology and the nature of the planet that we live on, which means honoring the environment and our relationship to all life comes first and foremost above everything else. And that all of our governance, social and economic and et cetera, decision-making should come from this stewardship that we must stand into at this time.
That's really amazing. Do you know what tribes you come from in Ireland? Because they were actually tribes, Do you know?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can only track back so far. My birth last name is Walsh. My birth name is Adam Apollo Walsh. And the Walsh clan is, all over Ireland. And I tracked it back far enough to find where my family were farmers and landowners and basically Druids. And the English were coming in, and a lot of Christianity was coming in with the English. And some of my family, the English would come in and they'd basically take what they wanted and they would burn and pillage, they would rape, and my ancestors got pretty sick of this. And Walsh and Wallace are actually the same name. If you trace them back far enough, they're part of the same family line. And both of them come from Volok, which is Welsh, and is a little bit more ancient term, which is related to the Welsh symbol, which is the dragon. And so my ancestors basically got sick of the English trying to take their lands and take their food and tell them what they should believe and what they should do. And so they went to battle against the English and burned down landlords' houses and, took on the fight, very much like you see in the movie Braveheart. And a lot of that's based on, true events and true stories. And a lot of that is my lineage and my ancestors. And so the Walshes became outlaws. And so what they did is they spread around Ireland and had as many babies as they could. Because if you can't overwhelm them politically, you could outpopulate them. And then a lot of my family, eventually came on ships and came over to the United States some generations back. Not too far though. My father actually has an Irish passport because his grandfather was directly from Ireland. So that's a little bit of it. But when you trace the belief systems and you trace the cultures, what I know is deeply within myself and my own ancestry. I can more easily ascribe that to the wisdom traditions that we call those of the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland. And I believe that a lot of the roots of my own personal wisdom and blood and perhaps incarnations have been connected to the wisdoms of the Tuatha De Danann and the sacred symbols that they used and the sacred rituals and processes that this people used in order to connect with the world and to build bridges with each other and to come into coherence with the land. There's so many beautiful, very simple practices that we can take to get more connected with our world. And a lot of the other Indigenous speakers at this event and those that you have heard in other places will speak of some of these lightly, often in terms or in the ceremonial form. But as an educator, I like to help people to better understand the simplicity of some of these practices. I'm also a physicist and I teach unified physics. And when it comes down to it, getting to know our world and who we are and where we are and where we're going to go and what we want to create in this world is all about getting to know the presence of where we are right now. And that is an intersection point. We are between the four directions. We are in a position on a planet, and that position requires that we get to know the forces and the energies and the moment in the cycle of time that we're in on this, beautiful spinning starship, as Buckminster Fuller called it, traveling through the universe. And so calling in the directions is more than just connecting to a series of symbols or a series of elements, fire, air, earth, water, or spring, summer, fall, winter, or sword and chalice and staff and stone in my tradition. It's actually about positioning and understanding that we are in a particular position in the world, and that particular position is going to have elements and energies associated with the directions depending on, what kind of experience we have of nature. And so the four directions are very different in the Southern Hemisphere than they are in the Northern Hemisphere because there's different elemental and energetic associations. Landscapes can have a lot to do with this as well. The continent we're on, the island that we're on, depending on where we are in the world, creates the context. And this is why environment and our connection to the environment is the ultimate context setter for how we choose to behave in the world. If we don't set an effective context of where we are on the earth and the nature of the environment around us, the nature of the earth around us, then we don't have the information that we need to make clear decisions about that. And that's why I also, think that, when it comes to governance, we need to look at bioregional governance as much as we look at something like nation state governance, because nation state lines are, in for all intensive purposes, they're just lines drawn on a piece of paper. They don't usually have a lot to do with the nature and the landscape and the biospheres that we find ourselves immersed in. And so here we are standing in the center of the four directions, and through this wisdom that we gain by understanding our relationship to the environment around us, now we're able to take action. And a lot of the different indigenous rituals, beyond calling in the four directions, beyond honoring the elements, they have a lot to do with getting to know the sort of archetypal texture of what it is to be a being and to give thanks for what allows us to be alive. When we talk about fire, air, earth, and water, when we honor Gaia in ourselves, what's the most personal way that we can do that? Well, it's by getting to know that the food that we eat and put into our bodies is going to become our flesh and our bone. It's going to become the earth that is our bodies. When we honor the water, it's because we recognize that we cannot live without water. We are mostly water. They say 70%, but that's not counting the water contained in cellular membranes, cellular nuclei, and the interstitial structures of our body, which are also mostly water. And when you really get down to it, it's 90% plus that we are made of water. And so it is essential that we develop a pure and coherent relationship with the water in the environment around us, because we are only going to survive if we have good water within us. Why do we honor the air? Well, I could not say a single word to you without breath. And it is breath that allows me to feel, to move energy in my body, and to express myself. And it's also air that's allowing me to receive the wisdom and the teachings of others, because the sound is carried through the air into my ears, which then sends off signals in my brain, changes how I feel, and this magic happens. Now, fire, some of us are like, well, there's no fire in the body. Well, that's not true at all. Do you not feel heat? Do you not get overheated at times? And we are radiating beacons of heat. We are full of energy. And when someone says you have a light body, they mean it, because you're literally radiating infrared energy into the space around you. So honoring the elements isn't just honoring concepts. Honoring the directions isn't just concepts. It's about understanding our position on the earth and our relationship to the aspects of the earth. And that includes the fire of the earth, because even though we don't necessarily consume the fire into our bodies, we warm ourselves by the fire in the winter. We're warmed by the fire of the sun. We are alive because of the fire of the sun and its gift to the winds and its gift to the earth and its gift to the flow of water in the water cycle.
Adam, I just want to add to the fire, actually there's a very interesting thing that you can probably use in the future. Actually, our brain contains gold particles. That's how we operate. And the gold particles in our brain creates a spark. That's how message translate to each other. It's actually the fire, because without the gold, we get kind of ignite. The sparks are extremely small and I don't know what the timing of it, but it's small and it's quick, So we do have the fire in our brain themselves also.
That's right. Yeah, our entire system is electrical, right? So we have this whole electrical nervous system, and electricity to some extent is a form of fire. And the indigenous peoples of different cultures knew and recognized this, because in a lot of ways, we look at lightning as a source of fire. When it sets a tree on fire like this, before we knew how to make fire, we would watch for the storm, and when the thunderstorm happened and the lightning struck, You go and you gather the fire from that tree that's been hit by the lightning. And so it's about building a relationship with these elements and building a relationship in ourselves. And just as I, started my whole story with, I had to come through a series of thresholds to learn how to restore my relationship with my own ancestry, because I was disconnected from that. And if we want to make changes on this planet that are truly sustainable, truly lasting, and enable us to truly thrive, they're all going to be about restoring relationship. And I think one of the most important things that we do here in the North American continent is, as a people, really understand the relationship that's been created with the different indigenous nations of this land, and to also restore the relationship that we have with the roots of the African cultures that came here as well, or were brought here in many cases on slave ships. And by healing these relationships, which is going to take a lot of work and a lot of honoring and a lot of really coming to the table and looking at how we can change the relationship that we have on a spatial level from, the reservations, frankly, are basically like concentration camps. We have to change our relationship with how we think about stewardship of the land and the way that land is held, the way that land is preserved, the way that land is given. We're so quick to say, great, like let's set aside 500,000 acres for wildlife conservation, right? Or so quick as, our last president has done, to just remove those protections, to take them away really quick, right? But we're not very quick at understanding that a lot of those wild lands were the lands of peoples that lived here for a long time. And unfortunately, within a lot of the reservations and within a lot of the indigenous groups and families, there's been so much wounding and so much trauma that restoring stewardship of land at that scale would be very difficult. And so this is a thing that we have to do together. As my indigenous teachers taught me in doing the prayer runs for world peace and the World Peace Prayer Day ceremonies, 11 or 10 and 11, the one in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and then up in Eklutna, Alaska, where I ran with a bunch of youth through the Yukon and Alaska, trying to avoid the state bird as much as possible, which is the mosquito. And in my journey with them, what they taught me is that we are going to do this together, and that it's about restoration of this sacred hoop, this rainbow bridge that we have when we all come together from our different lineages, no matter what your background is, no matter what your bloodline is, and we come into collective honoring of our role together as children on this planet and children on this earth. And I believe that that is the most essential process for us to go through right now, to do that restoration. It's not about blaming, it's not about shaming, it's not about making people wrong. It's about restoring relationship. Oh, I lost your audio there, David. Gotcha.
Okay. A relationship is actually the most important key. How we relate to Mother Earth, how do we relate to each other, how do we relate to our communities and the world. I mean, this is what makes us human, because that's relationship. Animals can just relate to each other animals, but they cannot relate further than that, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, perhaps. I mean, as long as we're able and willing to listen. I think that some of the most valuable lessons I've learned from Indigenous elders in my life is learning how to listen, learning how to be quiet, how to hold your thunder, and to be still. And I learned it through, pretty sharp whip cracks at different points in time. And it's difficult. It was difficult being the white kid and already feeling like an outsider and feeling like whatever I had to say wasn't going to be as valuable because I'm not Native, or I'm not Indigenous, or I'm not this or that. But I've struggled with elders my whole life, but primarily through teachers, that always thought they knew better than me, and yet couldn't answer my questions, and elders who take for granted their eldership, not as wisdom keepers, but as a mechanism for controlling those younger than them, or a mechanism to somehow gain some sense of power. And so I'm very sensitive to those edges, and I've learned to develop that sensitivity over time. I think it's very, very important that in this time right now, though, we humble ourselves and we recognize that there are voices that have not been heard. And while I feel very strongly about the things that I have to share, I have a voice that counts and that matters, and that my voice can inspire people, and that my voice can help people. I'm also still a white male, and I cannot overlook the support that I've had because I'm a white male, because of the way that our society has been set up. And so it's very important to me that the voices come now from those whose voices have been taken away or drowned out due to racism and due to societal constructs and belief systems that have dominated, on the planet for a very, very long time, due to, primarily British colonialism and the processes of colonizing that even our religious institutions have instated. So I would love to hear more of the voices of the hidden ones, the quiet ones, the ones that have been behind the scenes, and make sure that their voices are heard around the world.
Adam, let's talk about just before we go, something very important. When during the Irish potato famine, the indigenous people of the Choctaw Nation, although they were still extremely poor and they were oppressed, they raised enough money to send to Ireland. Do you know about that story?
I've heard a little tidbit about it, but I don't know the whole story, so I wouldn't be able to tell it.
Oh, no problem. Because during the Irish potato famine, people were dying there, and at that time, the indigenous people heard of it. A struggle of another tribe. They actually saw the Irish as another tribe, very far away. They couldn't even imagine where they were, but they heard that they were starving. So the Choctaw Nation raised enough funds. Then the money was sent to Ireland to save people's lives. Although they were
Beautiful.
Struggling themselves, they found the strength enough to do that. And there's a monument in Ireland dedicated to friendship between the Choctaw Nation and the Irish. So that's why I say that the friendship of the Irish and the indigenous people are so strong like that. Just people don't know about it, and now you coming forward as an Irish lad, we call it, Irish lad, saying that I'm here to support indigenous people, is that it is a mutual. Ireland needed help, and the indigenous helped them, and now you're coming back to help back. So it's a mutually that complete that circle. That circle,
Yes.
what we call the circle of life, is that we are all connected, and we basically need to all work together, right?
That's right. And I'm not surprised about that story at all. My experience of the Choctaw Nation is that they're some of the most generous and caring, selfless and loving people that I've ever encountered. And I believe we had a huge amount of support from the Choctaw in the prayer runs for world peace. And I'm very, very thankful to that nation for their support in peacemaking, and of course, in supporting my ancestry and my people from Ireland. It's deeply meaningful to me. And I do believe that restoring right relationship with each other is just like that. It's just that simple. It's just giving back, and even if you don't have enough, just giving what you can, because often it's just a little bit of extra I like to think of it as the energies of the West. And in my tradition of the Tuatha De Danann and the Druid tradition, the idea of the West is the place of giving away and letting go. So as the sun sets each day, you're giving away the day. You're giving thanks and gratitude for the day, but you're going to let go of that which you don't need anymore, right? And this is what part of what we celebrate in the night. And we gather around the fire and we share the gifts of the harvest of the day. And that energy of the West is also the energy of the fall, which is the harvest time. And the idea of abundance in my culture is that whatever you do not need, if you can give it away to others, it becomes abundance. And so that's it. It's just giving away that little bit of extra that you don't need, that can create enough abundance for all of us to thrive here on Earth.
Thank you so much for your time, Adam Apollo. How do people can find out more about your work, your website, or information you can share with us, so we could people can connect with you and
Sure.
also learn how they can work with you?
Sure. Yeah, they can find me. It's pretty simple. You can Google Adam Apollo and I'll come right up a bunch of times. But adamapollo.com is the easiest way to find me personally and some of my work and projects. I'll also be speaking tomorrow, I believe, at 4 p.m. Pacific during the blockchain conference here on the Live Aid streams. And we'll be sharing a little bit more about my work in the technology sector, because I'm very, very interested in technologies that provide for sovereignty and security and deep interconnection with each other. And so a lot of my work and my team's work is about building direct peer-to-peer architecture and systems that can enable us to learn, to grow, and to connect with each other without being throttled, without being monitored, without having all of these control structures built in on top that serve the highly unethical business models of our current social media strata.
Thank you so much for coming on. Next, we'll have Fernando Bosa. He's gonna talk about the sacred geometry and building the General Assembly building for the Thousand Nations. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you tomorrow, Adam Apollo.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Fernando?
David, we are live here, and I wanted to record this, but it says I have to get permission from you if you get a chance. It is such a privilege to be on Live Hope today, watching the many speakers in the last few days, the rolling of dialogue, of thunder, of a new civilization of humanity coming online to build a new reality from the ground up. We get to play with the messages of the ancestors. We get to interact with Gaia herself, Pachamama, the Great Mother. She's given us solutions right now for the subjects of free energy, healing technology for our bodies, a clean, structured water source for everyone, the availability of superfood to regenerate our bodies. And how about what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how would one approach the design of the city of peace, right? We've had conversations already, David, and now we get to unfold some of this language. So thank you. I'm excited to be here. Oops, you're muted.
Fernando, first of all, thank you so much. So we're gonna first ask, Fernando is gonna tell us who he is and what he does and what his passions are. Then we'll go deep dive into, because we're building for the Thousand Nations, a new federation of nations. It will be built, it's not only a General Assembly building, we're building a mini city called the City of Peace, which will house the Thousand Nations, a wellness center and everything. But we're building it based using sacred geometry, finding out the ley lines, the energy grids, and using ancient technologies to to actually, when you our goal is to, when we in the city of peace, when you enter the city, it has a healing energy or frequency that when you go in and you come out, your body is healed and better. Not There's nothing else better, but it's more well than before. Could you talk a little bit about who you are and what you do and why is it important?
You know, it's always unraveling to describe a multidimensional, multicultural, and multidisciplinary background of an entire lifetime. So there's not one label I could say that would appease individuals watching, because my background goes into secret space program black technology. It also goes into a complete awakening process that opened up my conscious connection to a larger version of what I am. So if someone wants to see my university background, I've studied architectural design, urban design and planning, cognitive science, artificial intelligence, cosmology, astrophysics, quantum physics, and it goes on. 12 years of university. And that's just one small section. Part of what I'm sharing here, David, is really there's nothing I could explain about my background that could really give an adequate platform of what we're about to talk about. So we're just going to let what we're going to share unfold for those who want to, what it would take to know what I'm going to be sharing. What is it that would release our mind, our neural connections, our relationship to knowledge, so that there are no more boundaries, no more boxes to describe my background. So sacred geometry is one of the many bag of tricks of natural universal law that we are going to be wielding in this project. And that's some of the things that I've studied as an artist, a conscious biofuturist, a terra healer, an artivist who's taken activism to a new level. All right. How's that sound for a beginning?
Oh, incredible. Just continue. I think reception is.
Okay.
Yeah,
When
you're frozen for a
one
while.
decides some point that did I get lost in that, or the whole call got lost?
Yeah, there was an issue. We couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. How are we sounding now? Okay.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
All right. At some point in our awakening process, this is when one is going through a conscious regeneration of their entire life. You start tripping across human on earth, right? And somewhere in there, December 21st, 2012, is when I asked a deep question. Could I build a light ship on Earth? Could a human being download the building plans to create cities of light? Where are those templates? Is what I was asking about. Where would one learn to channel and translate Akashic inheritance from our ancestors of how to speak with the elements, right? How do you speak and have a conversation with electricity or light or sound or magnetism or gravity or crystal energy or plasma, right? Because we are taught these energies are separate from us. Somehow physics has compartmentalized our understanding so that we graduate from school as engineers, architects, scientists, still disconnected from spirit. When I'm asked or tasked to come up with an idea for the city of peace, to somehow heartstorm, inner source, a shape, when people say, well, what would it look like? Right? You and I talked about this. The question could be, what do I wish to go through when I come to the city of peace? When I participate in ceremony at an assembly building, what sort of transformation would I like to experience and the participants, so they are different humans, different ways of being? Could that be done in architecture? Is there technology for ascension, ascended thinking, right? And the answer is yes. The ancients gave us lots of clues from our, as you've mentioned, when one practices cosmic archaeology of monoliths and pyramids and sacred sites, you get to the question, what is sacred space? And what does geometry and sacredness have to do when you bring those two together? What it does is it opens up a whole new science of consciousness. What are the physics of the building blocks of spiritual reality is what we're getting to. Okay. So as you mentioned, when one would arrive at a city of peace, how about having a kind of decontamination process to reground and reconnect our bodies to the earth, to the stars, to the galaxy, so that when we speak at an assembly building, we are coming from the larger I, unity consciousness, right? So that would be one of thousands of design parameters that we would put in the definition and if you want to say performance parameters of such a site, of such a building. And I want to share with the audience, I just got back from Seattle, Washington, lockdown 3.0, in the middle of downtown Seattle. Large buildings are going up. There are cranes putting up a new monstrosity of a convention center, a new abomination condominium tower. There's lots of that going on. And at the same time, we got the homeless living in the alleys next to the construction sites. At the same time, humans are wearing masks and so forth. I'd like to take that image back to my School of Architecture at University of Washington and show a picture 25 years ago when I went to school there in the 90s and say, look what we've done. Is there anything in this entire school that teaches medical, technology, engineering, science, architecture, physics? You know, there's all these different disciplines. Is there anything in those systems to stop us and guide us to evolve beyond the pandemic, to establish cities of peace? The answer is no, not right now. You know, the mathematics that we use in school don't have symbols for love and compassion. The engineering we study in school doesn't have a process for compassion and consciousness. The scientific process that we learn in school, the very physical laws that we learn in school, don't include us, you and I, in those formulas, our intention, right? So how about for this project, we describe, just like we have our pledges that are described on the website, the beautiful Constitution of Peace, the consciousness science that we're going to use in this project, right? The scientific principles that we do want to embody, and the architectural process that we want to invoke. So we would have to redefine the disciplines themselves. It would be very important to work with individuals who are already on this path, because you can't really retrain someone from the beginning if they haven't decided to do this. Okay? So let's get to answering some of the questions of what would it look like? What would it feel like? One of the processes in architecture is to create a massing model. This is a very simple geometry, like boxes or spheres or pyramids, and start putting them together to come up with the first volume of a building. And this is what the first scale models are made out of. They start 3D printing the massing models without windows or doors so you could feel the space. And what I'm saying is, if you're already doing that, we're already too late. We need to start with the story that we're going to tell in this place. The sacredness doesn't come from a geometry, it comes from the intention of the design. What is our intended transformation at the City of Peace? So I'm going to share a few postcards from the future. Visualize being an ambassador of peace in the galactic sense, which means process, an initiation to be this kind of human that aligned our bodies and our mind to the frequency of peace. The sound of compassion would be flowing through our nervous system, so that the thoughts contained in our minds, in our brain, and our whole body would be complete thoughts of peace and compassion. It would be a language that we would speak at this place. Just like having Sanskrit or indigenous language, we would develop a protocol of how to communicate in this place. So when visiting dignitaries come, they get aligned and entrained to this. So let's say you have a war general arrive at the City of Peace, someone who is a strategist in war. It would be quite interesting to transmute all of their way of seeing the world with the lens of war, to remove that and place in front of them an instrument of abundance and unity and nothing that would threaten or trigger war thinking. So whatever we're doing in these buildings, in these streets, the food we're serving, the water, has to have an opening dialogue with everyone coming in there, right? To the point where you would experience looking at one of these entrance ways like a portal, and you would have a spontaneous awakening knowing that you're looking at something like a UFO. You know, when they show on TV the UFO that the military would have in a hangar, just sitting there like Hangar 18 in Area 51, and you have an awakening that this stuff really exists. That's how rare peace is right now. And freedom. Those two pillars are something we don't know much about. We have not had peace on this planet easily since the last complete cycle of 26,000 years. Everything we learn in school is about the history of war. So we need to reconnect ourselves with what do we mean by peace? What do we mean by freedom? Because we don't know these things. All right, so let's take a deep breath just now and hold those two ideas, peace and freedom. What is your greatest experience of peace in your life? What is the most free you've ever been in your life? Most people are going to say very little. Who are the experts of peace and freedom on earth is the question. So those are the kind of questions we are going to be asking in our heart-storming sessions when we're designing this. Not what shape it's going to be, what transformation. All right. So does this bring up any ideas, David, already about shifting the context? Maybe you took off.
Hi,
All right.
this is Alice. I am hosting for the time
Alice,
being.
how are you? Thank you for
Good.
allowing me to have that.
David got off the Zoom for a short while. He'll be back on, but I wanted to ask some questions. When you
please.
asked the question, when do you feel at peace and freedom? I feel it when I'm connected with nature or floating on the water with no barriers, no boundaries to express and feel.
Right. Could this be achieved with square blocks of concrete,
No,
like in a building?
no.
This cannot be that. It cannot be another one of those, right? When you're having this dialogue, Alice, with nature, and specifically in water,
Mm.
the energy of flow, the energy of shape-shifting comes into play with a liquid existence. When you're floating in a river or in a lake or in the ocean, when you're in a hot spring, something happens to your body. Something is happening at the physical level, the atomic level of your cells, right? Wouldn't it be beautiful to do that in architecture?
Yes.
Right? That's where we're heading with this project, to establish a liquid relationship with nature at the City of Peace. What we wanted to play. We're going to put something like that as one of the design parameters. We would like you to feel like you're floating in water. Wouldn't that open up some brain cells from our design
Yes.
team?
Creativity. Yes, definitely.
Have you ever? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And walking on
One
air.
of the cool things that happens in water and walking on air. Yeah, I love that. You know, I go hiking in the Gila Wilderness near the cliff dwellings in New Mexico a lot and get lost in those canyons 5-10 miles deep where there's nobody. There are places that are so pristine that nobody's moved a rock or made a footprint in those areas. And that gives me an idea of what it would be like to be in that silence of the matrix. So another part of this is to have solutions that distance us completely from the matrix. Technology, advertising, invasive media, anything that is control-based cannot be included in the design of these cities of peace, right? It's like
Right.
creating a vortex with an event horizon that keeps the matrix out. Completely in an existing site, like an existing building. I'd like to start with a natural canvas to do this.
Yes. And the only
Yes.
boundaries I feel that should be in place is for safety reasons.
Yeah, that's it. So maybe some kind of force field technology, right? But not force as in brute force, power, harmony.
Mm.
If you want to be more technical, something that establishes coherence and truth. So one of the things that keeps us from understanding peace and compassion and being in freedom is those invasive messages of lack, of limitation, of control. And those are exactly what is in place in government processes all over the world. You go to the existing UN, it is nothing but a process of control and lack and war and limitation. It's until we see the actual humans that are doing the work at the UN, not the building itself. We don't want to highlight technology that is bigger than humans. Like, let's say, the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, that monstrous machine that they built reduces the human input down to nothing almost, right? At the very core of designing a city of peace, it is to highlight and amplify human consciousness, the intention of the heart. How do you translate something like that into architecture? Well, that's what we're going to be doing. How does that
Sounds
sound?
amazing.
All right. One of the things that we find in what we call sacred geometry, we'll put that over here for a second. Another word I'm bringing in is cymatics. Those who haven't experienced cymatic patterns, it's spelled Cymatics, cymatics, on YouTube. Look at what it looks like when water is vibrating with a particular tone, a frequency. Let's say 432 hertz. It creates these beautiful six-sided star patterns that are floating on the surface of the water. So when you stop the sound, the pattern goes away and the water settles. We would like to create a cymatic architecture that when you walk onto the site, your body is resonating your cells at the frequencies of peace and love and the Schumann resonance of the earth. So when you're speaking at a conference, you're coming from a place of stability and coherence and truth and harmony with the earth, with your entire entourage of ancestors that are inside your DNA. Wouldn't it be cool to have architects that speak this language? Right?
Yes.
That's another thing that we're bringing to the table. Designers and a team of artists of the heart that don't have the limitation of what they teach us in school, the colonized, Western view of architecture. All right. Let's keep it going a little bit further. What if we could design our future all the way to your cells and DNA in your body? How would that work? Well, those who have gone and done that kind of process with themselves, I'm doing that right now. I am redesigning this brain right this moment, and through this time of the situation on earth, right this moment, I'm taking that focus to my own body, to my own brain, to my own cells, having a conversation with my DNA to prepare myself to do these kinds of projects. Some individuals, when they're asked to do their great creation, they approach it with such uncertainty and low self-esteem and trauma. They are individuals that are stuck in their language. They're going like, my name is, something is staticky in that. When you go inside and open up your communication abilities and you connect the circuits with your spirit, connect your relationship grounded to the earth, something happens when you speak, when you create from the heart, in coherence, in resonance with love. What happens is that your bandwidth increases. You see more light. You hear more bandwidth. One can say that you have thoughts that are multidimensional, and you put a foot in this reality right now as we are 3D, lockdown, earth consciousness, and you put a foot into the future, the quantum future of what we're doing right now. And what does that human look like? It looks like everybody that's spoken here today, right, Alice? No limits.
That's right.
Yeah. When this happens, the first thing you want to do is connect with a younger generation, the children, the teenagers, and share that there are adults that get it. There are those mature beings that woke up and are leading the way. I see that there's an entire young generation right now that is ready to do the creation. I don't want to say the work. I'm talking about the expression of this new architecture. I keep hearing about all these projects of wanting to build a healing center, wanting to build an eco village, a place for seniors, a school for children. These are what's happening right now around the world. And I feel if I tune in telepathically right now, there are over 1,000 groups here in the US and in Canada doing this right now. They're looking for land. They're raising their money. They are putting together prototypes. So the seeking is going to open up opportunities for people who know how to build domes, geodesic domes, earth ships, Cal Earth ecodomes, yurts, teepees, all those structures are going to be multiplied in this project. We're going to see teepee looking pyramids of high consciousness, shapes that have all the little triangles of a teepee coming up to a point. There's a star opening at the top like a skylight and a footprint, things that are 12 stories high and beyond. And being able to go inside these structures and walkways that take you up on a spiral. And as you're going up, you're being introduced to all your superpowers, your mental telepathy abilities, your remote viewing, your sleep lucid dreaming abilities, your healing of your body, the supercharging of your immune system so that your cells no longer allow any virus or bacteria to attach themselves to them. Wouldn't this be beautiful to have architecture that begins and accelerates the healing process even before you go to any meetings or ceremony or presentations? Doesn't that sound beautiful?
Yeah.
That's where we're going with this project. David and the entire team of peacekeepers are inviting crazy individuals like myself to start putting this dialogue, this flowery language on paper and show us what would this look like. So we get to invoke these gifts to select and invite the earth, the mother, to show us where she wants us to do this work, right? To be guided to the site, because the water is already heading in that direction. The underground rivers, the aquifers are ready to provide structured water that rejuvenates our bodies while we are at these cities of light. The electricity itself is ready to provide endless power in a nice healing way in these buildings, in these sites. And all of the forces of nature have waited for us to do this. They're like, what took you so long, right? So this is what we're going to be playing with in this project. A dialogue with nature that's going to guide us to the technologies and the frequencies and how to take the stone and the water and the minerals in that site and put together shapes that are going to be transmitters and receivers of life force, chi, prana, ki, ka, all those words that we know, organite. This is what's going to be collected in the walls of these buildings and benevolently transferred to people's bodies while they're inside and around these sites. We are going to be the new pyramids, is what we're saying, intended to last 1,000 years, 7 or more generations. Welcome back, David.
Yes, sorry about that. I was had to jump off a little bit, but I'm sure you can take care of yourself.
All right, so we're jumping into a few different dimensions of how we would approach this project, what kind of technology we would use, and really how we would give the design direction and share with our team. Because before we start coming up with shapes, we want to craft the entire storytelling that's going to occur at this place, right? And part of what you might have heard in the last part is we're asking the earth itself to invite us and reveal to us the perfect site right now, telepathically, through our dreams, to our heart, through inspiration, through synchronicity. We're going to see the right listings for property. As a matter of fact, I see all of this being donated. We don't have to buy this, right? I can't think of a state in America that wouldn't want this project in their state right now. You know, part of
Yeah,
this,
definitely. I think it's important. I think it's one thing is that the law of attraction. Like we're gonna attract what we want, right? So if
right.
right, it's tune into that frequency, like you just said. Is that correct?
Oh, that's it. And we want to integrate healing over here, rejuvenating the body as part of everyday process in this site. You should get younger coming to these ceremonies and meetings and participating. When I look at people at the UN, they have all those desks and they have their microphones and their name tag. Have you ever seen what half the people are doing? They're sleeping. They're tired. They're exhausted. They're eating who knows what kind of cafeteria food, The first thing we're going to do is like coming home to a spa of healing. If you want to come to these centers, you're going to be surrounded by medicine people and shaman and healers that have been doing this their whole lives. This doesn't happen at the UN, right?
Right.
You will have food cooked with love from different disciplines. Everything from, indigenous healing food to Ayurvedic to Chinese herbology, that will be highlighted, the norm. You won't see Coca-Cola vending machines at this place, is what we're saying. Okay. So one of the great attractors, speaking of the law of attraction, is going to be a call out, an invitation to the innovators, the future thinkers on this planet. And we have to create a destination for them. If you are in the middle of let's say the Four Corners area, here where I am in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, if we were to gather free energy inventors, sacred geometry architects, healers, people working on regenerative technologies of the heart, if those individuals get together, I can't wait to see what we come up with. Because never, and I'm talking about never, have we ever had that happen that I know about in the last few thousand years, where the artists, the healers, the medicine people, the children, the women are the ones really given the direction. That's going to be innovative, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. That's the goal is to create the paradigm shift to a new world that is has wealth, prosperity, abundance, wellness, and cooperation and peace and everything else. That's very different from this existing paradigm. So, although it's a city of peace, it's
Right,
small. But it can have a huge impact on the world.
right. Of course. So I'm going to share a little bit of technical vocabulary for those who are really interested in sacred geometry architecture and what does it take to create healing spaces and how to establish, was that me?
Yeah.
How do we establish sacred space, right? What does that mean to create a sacred frequency? Right now in our cities, if we were to ask ourselves, where can we go to experience sacred geometry buildings, right? There's not that many. You have to actively go look for them, and they're not necessarily something you're going to like. Sometimes they're banks, sometimes they're military or government buildings that have co-opted this technology, tried to make it their own, to show dominance and power and to reduce humanity, right? That's part of what we're going to invert. We're going to reposition sacred geometry as an amplifier of consciousness. So part of this has to do with becoming a filter of coherence. That means any noise, any confusion that is in your body, in your mind, or in the environment, it could be chemtrails, it could be sacred geometry has a way of reflecting that noise back out to the world, while inside, let's say a flower of life design, a seed of life, all these different sacred shapes, a triangle, a circle, a cube, if you want to go into third dimension, they can only reflect coherence, symmetry, truth, order, universal law. That's the only thing that can exist inside of sacred space. So that's one of the many different technologies, buildings that can only reflect to us back coherence. So let's say you have an argument in a sacred geometry dome with these 60-degree angles, like the volsahedron shape I shared with you. And we're going to share a link later for people to be able to take a look at it. What if the building
Could you share screen,
transformed?
Fernando, could you
Yes, I
share
definitely
screen?
could.
It's better to
Yeah.
show it to for visual. Yes.
All right. Give me a second here,
Mhm.
and we'll pull one up. Because now we get to play. All right, here we go. Right here. This is a slide. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, yes.
All right, I'm just pulling up some geometry that is part of a presentation of cubes embedded in cubes, surrounded by spheres. But what we're looking at is sacred geometry in third dimension of the flower of life, the one people know about. They've never seen it in third dimensions. This is a geometry I'm working with. It's called the Healing Codex. It's a 24-sided, 12-pointed star in the middle of all these circles. This is a shape that I've turned into a dome, an actual structure. This is the cymatic sound pattern, starting to look familiar, like these triangles, right? You're looking at a multi-dimensional thing. And this shape that you're looking at right now, made in water with sound, is a portal that distorts time and space, that can heal your body, that can teach your brain new things. This is a picture of a molecule from IBM showing spheres packed together to form hexagons, right? It's showing you a 6-pointed star with intersecting hexagons. And this is the Healing Codex shape I showed you earlier with the actual terms inside. Can you still see the geometry?
Yes, yes, we can see it very clearly.
So what I want to show is that as designers of this new future, we're going to be working with shapes that are in themselves stargates, technology that you can dial, move the rings to set it up to travel, just like the movie Stargate on TV. But each destination is consciousness, it's love, the arrangement to transform human bodies, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go a little bit faster. I'm not going to go through this whole explanation. This is technology that can be projected on the body itself. Right here is my partner, Akurda. We're doing a projection of the Metatron Cube technology on her body to program DNA. If you've heard of Atlantis, the old Atlanteans had technology of light and geometry and sound. What we're talking about is having direct access to the control panel. Architects and designers and engineers and scientists that have this language. Did you have a question?
No, no.
All
Hello?
right.
Uh-huh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you were frozen for a little while.
Oh, okay. I'm still screen sharing.
No, it's good. It's good because people are visual.
All right. So this is one of the domes, the Vosahedron. It's like a dodecahedron, a icosahedron. It's its own geometry. This shape that you're looking at has been 3D printed and is already generating frequencies from the plastic that I 3D printed. Let me rephrase that. This shape you're looking at right here that did not exist on Earth with all those angles exactly the way it's created is already mitigating heat and cold. It cools itself without an air conditioner, and it's going to have windows. But we can build these buildings in a formation. This particular image has 3 of these domes working together as a generator of life force. And when we have like a series of laboratories working together to generate free energy, there is no generator that makes the electricity. It is the buildings themselves that emanate a force field of energy that could be used to make light, to make heat, to cool down, to cook, to heal your body. And these are already being used. This is a real project I'm showing right here, the Maitreya Center. It's a healing sacred space. Gardens could be planted in sacred geometry form because the way that energy moves through them is highly efficient. We're going to hyper efficiency with what we're talking about. We're also talking about the redesign of clothing as technology to heal your body. So there's opportunity for artists and craftspeople and creators of a new civilization in all of this. I'm going to jump out of this for a second. Stop the share.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, I just wanted
Very
to give a
interesting.
glimpse that this geometry we're talking about is the seed to new forms of thinking, complete new technology that is natural, doesn't need electronics with it. We don't need the computers anymore to do this kind of work. How interesting is that?
Very interesting. I think it's not new. Probably the ancients did know about a lot more about. We're just rediscovering a lot of these technologies now that are sacred.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you look at how the flower grows, like a sunflower or pineapple, it's all based on sacred geometry, right? Is that correct?
Right. And that practice is called biomimicry for those who want to look further into how to imitate nature, how to imitate life, where you already assume nature has taken infinite amount of time to experiment with everything and has come up with the most efficient, magical ways of building. This is what you see in trees and in planets and in cells, right? So yes, biomimicry, nature.
Definitely, there's a lot of things to learn from nature, and we're still learning
Oh yes.
because we are all part of nature.
Aha. So we're
So to create this blueprint for for this city, right? Let's talk a little bit more about not only architecture, because we were talking about how we're going to develop a team to build this, right? And just how to manifest this, right? How you were explaining to me what your vision was to develop a team for this project. Just example, the United Nations itself was designed by 9 architectural firms from around the world. So it is not a individual, one person can do it. It's multiple people, right, coming together, and organizations, right?
oh yes, it is unity consciousness. A team that unites will give birth to a new form together, that it wasn't no one person's ego or one direction, because this is not about that anymore. And this has to be balanced by not just having a bunch of men do it either, right? This is, to me, key. We've already let the men do it. The masculine energy can be entrained by the divine feminine approach of peaceful interaction, nurturing, and giving birth. Because this city of peace is a birthing place of water, it's a birthing place of life. We are going to be giving form to peace on earth. We don't really know what it looks like, or freedom, is what I mentioned early on in this call. And I believe we are ready for that task. Because if we challenge ourselves, we invite the team to visualize peace and the shape of it. What does it look like? We are going to be inviting the ancestors, inviting the earth. We are going to be playing with the energy that's going to be showing us, because they already know those shapes and forms and the design blueprint, right? It's already there. We're going to be reading from the larger version of reality to download this. And we have to surpass existing architecture, transcend everything that we were taught in school, and just kind of leave it behind for what's next. Teachers from universities around the world are going to be paying attention to what we come up with. Leaders from different countries are going to be subscribing to our publications and updates and videos to see what we come up with, right? Corporations that are going to be transforming themselves into positive, human-centered organizations. It's going to happen. They're going to be paying attention to what this project is going to be doing, because the next design of Google or the Gigaplex factory is not going to look like a big box anymore. I promise you that. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting what we're doing together. Is that because humanity is evolving, and
Yes.
architecture or the city has to evolve with our learnings and experiences. And as we know, we're all basically consciousness is collective consciousness and the individual consciousness, but overall is the collective combined consciousness everyone put together. And we're just right now co-creating everything together. And this is right now we're doing this broadcast not because Fernando Wasa is gonna take on the this project and design everything himself. What we're doing is this transmission is we're giving a call to action to invite the world's architects, sacred design, sacred geometry designers, people with leading edge technology that will help better humanity and bring better health, more peace, organic food, whatever your talent is. We're inviting everyone into the container to create a model city. It's probably the first one, but it's a model city, the city of peace, that is based on sacred geometry completely. Everything will be fine-tuned to align with the energy of peace, energy of love, energy of passion, energy of consciousness. So that's why.
Well, we're coming up on our half hour. I want to honor other speakers' time. What I do want to share is that each one of us was incarnated. We came to this planet, this realm, already packaged with that vision inside of us. And unfortunately, it could be contaminated or clouded, or we've been distracted. We have amnesia. When one goes through the process of reconnection, self-discovery, you bring that forward. So each individual that's going to come to this team will already have their birth child, their seed of consciousness. They've been working on this most of their life. Most of the people that we speak to already have these beautiful gifts and concepts ready to play, right? And then there's another realm of humans that want to accelerate and support, so that there's another layer of manifestation. And outside of them is a whole beautiful collection of guides and overseers and mentors and masters that are part of this process. And beyond them is the ancestral realm. And beyond them is the cosmic star family realm. This is what we're going to play in this project. It's going to be layers and layers and layers of unity consciousness to manifest a seed. That's the way I like to see it.
Fernando, thank you for coming here and sharing the vision. Where can people find you? Do you have a website or something that people can find you? Of course, they could also find us through com26b.com or the lifehopefestival.com. But for you personally, where can people find you?
The easiest way is to search my name on Google, because I am on, I have a YouTube channel, I have a Vimeo channel, and there are several portfolios online that you'll see just by typing my name and look at images. You'll see a lot of the designs of the Volsahedron come on really fast. I've actually stepped back from a lot of my social media channels. I'm starting to, I don't have a LinkedIn anymore. I don't have a Twitter anymore. I eventually just want to focus on what we're doing without social media. I only want our inner tribal media to be our source. But right now, the easiest way on YouTube, if you look up Vosa Lectures, there's a whole playlist of the latest drops that I've done to showcase this project of the Volsahedron, to talk about all the technologies, and to deconstruct the mind into becoming a leading edge human. So it's wide open right now. I invite people to contact me on Facebook. I'm easily reached on Messenger.
Thank you so much for coming on. So we'll be speaking again very soon. Thank
David,
you.
my gratitude